which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm going to ask at this time if anyone has thoughts, anyone have someone for their thoughts? It's on, and I feel like I'm holding it pretty tight. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, one more time. Is there anyone that we should keep in our thoughts and hearts today? Well, if nobody has anyone, I'm going to ask for a little extra space. My husband just lost his grandma this morning. So keep my husband's family in your thoughts. Thanks. Let's see, we have two visiting visitors today. Steve Dakin, we all know Steve, thanks for coming. And Park Woodall brought his wonderful wife, Susan. So welcome. Thank you for coming. Can I invite John up to sing, drown out my voice? You can
As we begin another Rotary year, it's a good time to remind ourselves to extend hospitality and welcome to our guests and visitors. One way we do that is by singing the welcome song. Please join with me. Welcome to you from Ames Rotary, Naveda, London, or Gay City. From far off lands or the USA, we're glad that you are here today. Come back again whenever you're near. Join us and then we'll make it clear. Around the world you will always be. Welcome at Rotary.
Perfect. Happy birthday, birth month to these Rotarians, and happy anniversary to these members. Oh yeah, please sit down and eat. I'm not sure which slide that comes after, but I'll be better, I promise. And I will ask that John goes ahead and sings to you for those anniversaries and birthdays.
So we're just going to do it one time. Let's see. Let's get birthdays. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Rotarians. Happy birthday to you and many more.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being a member. Oh, let's see. Tom Walsh. Tammy Quillette, 2 years. Cool. John, 2 years. Good job. Okay, we have a couple announcements. Cultivating Hope Farms has invited our club to their groundbreaking ceremony on July 15th, Thursday, from 5 to 7. We've got some really cool things happening out there. They're building a huge horse barn. It's really neat if you wanted to learn more about it and go and kind of hear their story and why they're doing what they're doing. I don't know if many of you know what Cultivating Hope Farms is. It's a kind of a ADA compliant farm where kids with disabilities can go and be around the animals. It's an incredible setting. It's at Raspberry Hill, just west of town. So if you have time, you can fit it in your schedule. It'd be a really great, rewarding experience. And I believe Steve also has an announcement, or he has something he'd like to say.
Yes, thank you. Finally passed as your governor. How about that? You all survived. I remember back at the beginning when I was governor-elect nominee designee. I couldn't wait to get rid of the designee. So I survived, you survived. I will tell you a little story about how a past district governor in an old shoe of light, the tone was always good. What I have here today, probably we're close, we're not there yet. I was asked today again about purple in my beard. We've been 22 weeks without a case reported, so we're close. We're gonna go 3 years. This actually is from Erna's year. They're always a year behind. And Erna asked me to bring it to you, so here I am. And so thank you for your support. Thank you for what you do for your community. Thank you for what you do for the district and global grant projects. You're at the top. So thank you, thank you. One of the things I want to say is I have a new title also, grandfather, as of 4 days. So, yeah. Really looking forward to that one. I also want to thank this club because you sent and bought a Sukup safety home last year, and that put us over 21 that this district purchased and supported. I want to tell you, Village of Hope is now has a birthing clinic down there in Haiti. And when you have some time, we have the Go Serve Global, which does a distribution of the Sukup Safety Home, is out of Eagle Grove, Iowa, and of course, ran by a Rotarian. So thank you all for your support this past year and for everything that you do. And I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. At this time, I will introduce Kent, or invite Kent to the microphone to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Kelsey. And if you'll pardon me, I'm going to read what is before me. And I want to share that it was a real privilege, a year or two ago, that I had the opportunity to meet our guest speaker at a Iowa 4-H Foundation function. And at that time, I thought it would be a great opportunity to have us have what Robert has to share. So Robert Waggoner wrote the acclaimed book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, now in its 15th printing. And he co-authored the award-winning book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, with Carolyn McCready. His books have been translated into French, German, Chinese, Korean, Czech, Finnish, and other languages, of which I assume English is one. A past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, IASD, Waggoner serves as co-editor of the online magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, which is the only ongoing publication devoted specifically to lucid dreaming. A lucid dreamer since 1975, he has logged more than 1,000 lucid dreams. Waggoner frequently speaks on the science and practice of lucid dreaming at international dream conferences, workshops, and college classrooms. Robert was born and raised in Hutchinson, Kansas, where he met his future bride on the debate team at Hutchinson High School, where she was a senior and he was a sophomore. It was during this time he recognized a true champion and that she had her debate partner routinely won debate tournaments. After his days at Hutchinson High School as a Hutchinson Salt Hawk, you'll have to tell us what that is, in Kansas, Waggoner then went to Drake University in Des Moines, where he graduated summa cum laude with a degree in psychology. While at Drake, Robert learned his fellow debater had moved to the Quad Cities to work for Iowa State University Extension. Therefore, he would call her up and ask her if he could hitch a ride home for the Thanksgiving and holiday breaks, since he didn't have a car. Those rides helped them to get to know each other better, and they were married in Hutchinson in 1984 on August 4th. So just as our longest term members, 37 years, they will celebrate their 37th anniversary this year. Robert and his bride now reside in Ames, where I believe they must be among the select few to have 2 actual residences. And I wonder if they may continue their debate strategies to determine in which home they will reside. The summer home, where I suspect Robert mows the lawn, trims the bushes, and tends to the flowers and garden, or the winter home, also known as the Knoll, for himself and Wendy. And with that, it is a distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our esteemed speaker, Robert Waggoner. Thank you, Robert.
Well, my thanks to all of you. If you can't hear me, just put up your hand like that and I'll speak up. And also I want to thank everyone who's listening online. I think it was in 2008, I decided to begin to write a book about something that I had a true passion in, and that's what's called lucid dreaming. And we'll get into what that means. Since that time, I've written another book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, with a co-author, Carolyn McCready. I think the first book is in its 15th printing, and the second book, I think, is in its 5th printing, so they've been very well received. But I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak and tell you more about my passion, which is lucid dreaming. So to kind of help you understand what a lucid dream is defined by the American Psychological Association as a dream in which the sleeper is aware that he or she is dreaming and may be able to influence the progress of the dream narrative. But for most of us lucid dreamers, we just think of it very simply as you realize within the dream that you're dreaming. Oh, this is a dream. And once you have that realization, then technically you're lucidly aware. So I'll contrast that a little bit. So think about a normal dream. So in a normal dream, you see Godzilla, and what do? You just react to whatever happened. Oh my God, Godzilla's here. I've got to tell my family, we got to get out of here, Godzilla. So in a normal dream, you're very reactionary. You lack any degree of high critical awareness. You just go with whatever comes. And in the morning, you think, oh boy, that was a crazy dream. Godzilla was there. But here's what happens in a lucid dream. You think for a second, Godzilla, wait a second, Godzilla doesn't exist. This is a dream. Or Godzilla, hey Godzilla, what do you represent? Or hey Godzilla, why are you chasing me? So when you become consciously aware of dreaming, then you can begin to ask questions. You have some level of critical awareness. You can begin to decide what you want to do here. Do you want to fly away? Do you want to question Godzilla? You can seek out insights. You can even do personal or scientific experiments. And so that's part of the beauty of lucid dreaming for the field of psychology. Now, when it comes to the field of psychology, people have been talking about lucid dreaming for thousands of years, but it wasn't until the late 70s that the scientific evidence emerged for lucid dreaming. And it first began with a gentleman, Keith Hearn, who was a doctoral student in England, and then later with Stephen LaBerge, who was a doctoral student at Stanford. And both of them thought, how could you provide scientific evidence that you can become consciously aware in the dream state? I mean, people can wake up and report it, but how could you actually scientifically validate it? So this is what they did. They brought lucid dreamers into the sleep lab, and they told them, when you become aware of dreaming, move your eyes left to right 8 times. And that'll provide the signal that you're consciously aware in the dream state. So you can see here the LOC and the ROC. That means left ocular and right ocular. And so at the beginning of the dream, the eyes are just moving every which way. They're just moving around as the person inside their visual screen, inside their head, is just looking around. But then suddenly you can see they're in the middle of the second line. All of a sudden, the lines begin to move in tandem. The eyes are moving in tandem, and the person is signaling, hey, I'm consciously aware within the dream. And then later in the third column there, you can see that the person is signaling, hey, I'm beginning the experiment. And then in the fourth column, hey, I'm ending the experiment. And then I'm going to wake up now, and they wake up. So this is how the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming emerged through what they call the eye signal verification technique. And so that evidence first came out in the late 70s through the work of Stephen LaBerge at Stanford and Keith Hearn at the University of Hull in England. So it's interesting when you get a neurologist and other psychologists involved in this area. There's a famous psychologist at Harvard, J. Allen Hobson, and Ursula Voss in Germany. And so they decided to put EEG skull cap on a lucid dreamer. And they told him in the sleep lab, we want you to signal with your eyes when you're consciously aware, and then we can get a brain recording of what the EEG scan would look like. So there at the top is that person when they're consciously aware and awake. The cerebral cortex is very active. You can see how it's all red and yellow. There at the very bottom is that same person when they're asleep and in a normal dream. The cerebral cortex is very quiet. And then there in the middle is when the person signals with his eyes, hey, I'm consciously aware within the dream. And all of a sudden the EEG starts to show that the front part of the cerebral cortex begins to light up and it shows conscious awareness. So that's the beautiful thing about lucid dreaming, is that it's been scientifically validated, and there's some wonderful studies about how the brain looks during a lucid dream. So sometimes people ask me, well, how prevalent is lucid dreaming? And so there's a wonderful journal, the International Journal of Dream Research. And so they went to various psychology classes in different countries and asked, have you ever become aware of dreaming while in the dream state? And in the USA, normally about 71% would say, yes, I've had that experience. In Germany, 82%, in the Netherlands, 73%, in Japan, 47%. So it's widely reported that it's happened at least once. They become aware, wait a second, this is too strange. Oh, this has to be a dream. That explains that. So that would technically be a lucid dream. But then when they ask people, how often do you become lucidly aware? There's about 30% of this group who has a lucid dream at least once a month. And so in the general population, it's probably around 50% of the people have had a lucid dream. But in this younger generation, about 25% of young people are having a lucid dream at least once a month. So there's a wonderful study in Germany by Ursula Voss. She went to a school where children were ages 6 to 19, and she asked them, had you ever become consciously aware in the dream state that you were dreaming? And of that group, about 51% reported a lucid dream. I believe, if I recall correctly, of the 8-year-olds, already 20% or so had already had a lucid dream. But of course, in general society, we really don't talk too much about dreaming. And so they didn't know that that was of any significance. But here is an example from the study of a girl who was age 10. Someone was haunting me, and I was with my girlfriend. The chaser stood before me and wanted to kill me. And then I realized it was only a dream. So I made the person disappear, and then suddenly it wasn't dark anymore. So that's a very simple lucid dream by a young girl, age 10. But of course, this can become very much more deeper as you get into lucid dreaming. So part of the potential of lucid dreaming is something that people like myself explore. I taught myself how to lucid dream back in 1975. By doing an interesting technique. I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda, where he told his friend Don Juan, or Don Juan told Carlos to find his hands in the dream state and realize he's dreaming. And so there really wasn't a technique, so I just made up my own technique. I knew about the power of suggestion, so before I'd go to sleep, I'd look at my hands and I'd say, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And I'd say that for about 5 minutes and fall asleep. On the third night of doing that, I was walking through B Hall in my Hutchinson High School, and all of a sudden, boom, my hands popped right in front of my face, and I thought, oh, my hands, this is a dream. And it was so incredible to realize that these football player guys, hey, they're dream figures. And this wall that feels so cool and nubby, it's really dream stuff. And so I went on and had an incredible lucid dream. But of course, I began lucid dreaming in 1975, and the scientific evidence didn't emerge until 1980. So I had about 5 years of doing this before the scientific evidence emerged. And I remember being at Drake University and very happy to see in Psychology Today magazine, I think it was January of 1981, Stephen LaBerge had an article in which he provided the scientific evidence for lucid dreaming. Because until that time, people would just say, oh, you're having a dream about a dream. And I said, no, I'm aware I'm dreaming. I know what I'm doing. But the beautiful thing about lucid dreaming is its potential. So first, it allows for experiments. You can do personal experiments. You can also do scientific experiments. Also, we'll see that people have used it to enhance skills. They'll practice their skills in the dream state, lucidly aware, and then they find that upon waking, they're even better. And also they use it to access creativity. People and even psychologists now are using lucid dreaming to help some people resolve emotional issues like recurring nightmares from PTSD. You'll see it also, it's being used somewhat to deal with anxiety and phobias and things like that. When you move into the more speculative range, you get to the idea of potential physical healing in lucid dreams. So I'll talk a little bit about that later. And also there's the idea of accessing an inner awareness, or what you might call your inner self. So here's an example of enhancing skills. There is a wonderful German psychologist who is a very active lucid dreamer. He brought up all the scientific evidence. And because he was so engaged in athletics, all of a sudden German athletes began to practice their athletic skills in their lucid dreams. So this is why this would be important. Let's say you're a downhill skier and you want to be the best downhill skier, the fastest humanly possible. But in the waking state, you could break your knees if you do some of these crazy maneuvers that would shave off a second from your time. But in a lucid dream, you know it's a dream, and here's an opportunity for you to practice something very difficult and dangerous. And after they would practice 5 or 6 times in the lucid dream state, then suddenly they could begin to shave off seconds in their downhill skiing time. And so there's some wonderful reports of various athletes in Germany using it for swimming and downhill skiing and things like that. And suddenly their times begin to improve. So they did a survey of German athletes, and about 9% of the professional German athletes actively use lucid dreaming to perfect their skills in the lucid dream state. Also, you can use it to access creativity. So here's an example of a young man, Dustin Lucas. He became lucidly aware, and he thought, oh, I want to find something that I can paint, because he realized he had in his left hand his sketchbook. And he says he turns around and suddenly he sees this image, the mirage of duality in the sands of time is what he called it. But he said the interesting thing about this was that it only took about half the time to paint this painting as it would in waking life. He said it was like he had already achieved it. And so when he started to paint it, it was just came to him so quickly and all. But people have used, this ability to access creativity to solve software programming problems in their lucid dreams. There's a gentleman who called in Albert Einstein. He and Albert Einstein would sit in the lucid dream, think about the software problem, and as soon as they figured it out, he'd tell Einstein to go away, and he wanted to memorize it before he woke up. And he said 95% of the time it was correct when he took it into the office. Also, lucid dreaming has helped with emotional healing. So here's an example. In waking reality, this woman was working at Chicago O'Hare. She was working on a Boeing 767. Suddenly it broke free from its moorings, and she watched in waking reality as it rolled across her legs and crushed one of her legs and had to be amputated. So she's in the hospital for 6 months and had her leg amputated. But she said, well, the problem was when she got out of the hospital, every night she'd have nightmares. And so she came across a book on lucid dreaming and realized that you could use lucid dreaming to resolve the nightmare. And so later that night, she realized, hey, I'm running, but I only have one leg. Oh, this is a dream. She became lucidly aware. She faced the monster who was chasing her in this particular dream experience, and the result was her recurring nightmares ended. So psychologists have begun to use lucid dreaming to help people who have recurring nightmares in PTSD, and they've also used the ideas of lucid dreaming in the waking state to help people deal with PTSD nightmares very successfully. But as you get into it, you begin to see that lucid dreaming could also help with other mental and emotional disorders. Like there's people who have phobias, and in their phobias, like let's say you have a phobia of spiders. In your lucid dream, you could begin to interact with spiders knowing it's a dream, and you could pop out anytime you want. And so they'd have people begin to interact with the feared situation. And after 4 or 5 lucid dreams like that, they no longer have a fear of spiders. Or there's people with obsessive compulsive disorders or people with anxiety who have used lucid dreaming to resolve the inner issue, and then suddenly the outer issue disappears. So when it comes to lucid dreams in the body, there's been some interesting scientific studies by Stephen LaBerge, who's one of the early lucid dream explorers. He brought people into the sleep lab, and he asked them, when you become consciously aware within the dream, signal with your eyes that you're consciously aware within the dream. Now I want you to change your respiration. So breathe very quickly or breathe very slowly. And what he found was that the physical body breathe, the respiration rate increased or decreased according to the scientific protocol. Then he had lucid dreamers come into the sleep lab, and he said, okay, when you become consciously aware in the dream, signal with your eyes you're aware, then start singing. And all of a sudden, the right brain hemisphere became very active, which is what you would see in the waking world. Or he had other people do math problems and counting, and then the left hemisphere became very active, which is what you'd see in the waking world. Then he had lucid dreamers become aware, and they would flex their wrist in an alternating pattern. And he had measurements on the wrist that showed this muscle movement that was occurring in the wrist patterns. So he basically concluded that dream events are closely paralleled by brain events. And why this is important is some lucid dreamers, and there hasn't really been scientific studies, but so this is more conceptual or speculative, is they're using lucid dreaming to help heal themselves. So here's an example. I co-edit this magazine, The Lucid Dreaming Experience, and in September we had this gentleman, Matthew Zinkar. He sent his lucid dreaming healing experience. So he had eye pigment dispersion syndrome, where his eye pigment was flaking off. He was just a man in his 30s. And the top scan, the occipital scan there at the top, is from a scan in April 2014. And you can see the numbers, and they show his eyes are in pretty good shape. But then he came to the eye doctor in January 2020, and now his eyes had deteriorated quite a bit. And the doctor says, look, this is getting really bad. You're having this eye pigment dispersion syndrome, and this is really bad. And so the doctor told him, I want you to come back in a few months and have another test. And so he decided, he knew about lucid dreaming. He was a pretty good lucid dreamer. So in a lucid dream, he decided to intend to heal his eyes in the lucid dream state. And suddenly, after those lucid dream attempts, he goes back to the doctor, and now his eye scan is much like it was 6 years earlier in April of 2014. And so the doctor says, well, I don't know how it happened. All I see is the results here that something happened. So you can see how potentially this might be a possible place that lucid dreaming might go to help with physical healing while in the dream state. So another interesting aspect of lucid dreaming is this, and this is why I call my first book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. I learned in lucid dreams that you could ignore all the dream figures and just shout out a question to the dream. Hey dream, show me something important for me to see. And then sometimes the whole lucid dream would change, or sometimes one thing would appear over there, or something would happen. And so this was really interesting to see this reply occur, because also other lucid dreamers were noticing it as well. They would just ask the dream a question, and then they would get a response. And so Carl Jung came up with the idea that if someone could show that there was a responsive element within dreaming, it might indicate a second psychic system, which would be an incredible discovery. And that's why I called my book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, because a lot of lucid dreamers now who've read my book, it's in its more than 15th publication and been gone all around the world. Normally what they'll do, they'll stop in a lucid dream and they'll shout out a question to the awareness behind the dream. Show me something interesting to see. Or, hey, what about this? And all of a sudden they'll see something. Sometimes they'll hear that they're not ready for the response and come back later when they're prepared. And so that's why I called my first book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. But in any case, it's very nice to be invited here to speak on the topic of lucid dreaming. It's a lot of fun to bring this idea forward. One thing I think you'll find is if you ask your nieces and nephews and grandkids, have you ever had a dream where you realize that you were dreaming? All of a sudden their eyes will light up and they'll go, oh yeah, this happened to me recently. And so that's the fun thing is when you interact with somebody who's a lucid dreamer, you'll realize how they're using it to play around, to learn how to deal with the issue or whatever that confronts them symbolically in the dream state. So again, thank you so much for having me. I think we have some time for questions if anyone has any questions. Thanks. Sure. We have a question at the back.
So during your dreams, have you ever physically changed, like gotten out of bed or start singing out loud when you woke up President Bernstein?
Occasionally you'll have this kind of two levels of focus, like, oh, I think my bed sheet is obstructing my breathing, but then the lucid part of you is watching some event occur over here. And so sometimes you get to that kind of funny level where you have one foot in both worlds. So that occasionally happens. Normally what you want to do, of course, is stay deeply in the lucid dream and do that. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you taught yourself how to do this. Is it that easy? Does your book talk about that? If we're interested, I don't think I've ever had that kind of experience. So
Right.
I'm quite curious.
Right. So the questioner asked, how does a person go about learning this? Do my books teach it? So my second book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, is the one that a person would want to get into this, or if they wanted to help someone in their family who was already a lucid dreamer. But yeah, there's various techniques that you can use in order to become consciously aware of dreaming. So for example, I shared the technique that I kind of basically developed in 1975 when I was reading a book. Each night before I'd go to sleep, I'd look at my hands and tell myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And so what happened after 3 nights, I'm walking down the high school hallway and boom, my hand popped right in front of my face. And I said, oh, my hands, this is a dream. So I use this is what you would call a conditioned response in psychology. So you could say, oh, whenever I see this, then I'll have this realization that I'm dreaming. But there's other ways of going about this. Especially in my second book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, I have about a dozen techniques that people use to become lucidly aware. Yep.
Has there been any studies done on lucid dreamers compared to non-lucid dreamers, and like post-sleeping, does one group feel rested while another group feels unrested?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so the gentleman asked, have there been any comparisons between lucid dreamers and non-lucid dreamers in terms of feeling rested and that sort of thing? What they've discovered is normally when you wake from a lucid dream, that next morning, you feel kind of invigorated and inspired. And so you don't feel like you've been working all night, you feel exactly the opposite. And so they've also realized that when they do comparative studies, that normally the lucid dreamers seem to have greater psychological integration and all these other factors. So that's what occurs. I think we have a question. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring up the word dreams, and it may not be in quite the same way.
Okay.
Harvard professor who recently retired, Sharon Parks, has written what is also classic already to say. It's called Big Questions, Worthy Dreams. If college students are there, and that's one thing that they need to do is develop the big questions of life. And then again, she puts that modifier in there, and maybe this is why it's more of a vision. What can I do in life? How can I make a positive difference? And so those are the worthy dreams that they start developing. I guess that's in light of your talk about what you can do and prepare for, like the athletes. The question then is this how a technique that people could use to, say, develop their worthy dream?
Right. Yeah, it definitely is, because what you realize as you get deeper into lucid dreaming, you're going to ask a question of the awareness behind the dream. Hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. Then all of a sudden the dream changes and there's something important for you to see. And normally later you'll realize, oh, why that was important and what that connected to. So you can begin to use lucid dreaming to kind of explore the mind in a deeper way. But also people use this without becoming lucidly aware. They just call it dream incubation. Tonight, I'll dream about something that'll provide a solution to how I can get out of this issue with my grandmother or whatever it is. And then that night you realize, oh, here's somebody delivering a bunch of flowers. And then, oh, grandma needs a bunch of flowers. That'll get her over the situation. Anyway, we have another question over here. Yeah.
You mentioned this would use PTSD. Have lucid dreamers helped to heal their PTSD? If so, please explain that.
Yeah, so post-traumatic stress disorder has a variety of symptoms, but one of them is recurring nightmares. I mean, some of these people have nightmares every night they fall asleep, and that's why a lot of them get involved in drinking a lot or taking drugs in order just to conk themselves out so they can get a decent night's sleep. And so there's been a fair number of research. There's a gentleman at the University of New Mexico, a researcher who's used lucid dreaming and the ideas of it to help people overcome that aspect of PTSD. But again, PTSD has there's a lot of symptoms, but what this has helped with, the lucid dreaming, is it stops the recurring nightmares. And once those stop, the person gets a decent amount of sleep and goes through all the normal sleep cycles. But when they have nightmares repeatedly, they never get deep sleep and they have issues. So probably just one more question and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah. Anyone? Yeah.
I'm trying to compare this to when you're like, I lost the word. You've been hypnotized, I guess is what I'm after. So some people get hypnotized and they come out of their hypnosis with a new energy, different ability to quit smoking or better sleeping or whatever. Is there any comparison between what you're talking about and hypnosis?
Right. So I would say that there is, to some degree, is of course in lucid dreaming you realize within the dream that you're dreaming, but once when you're aware at that deeper level of the unconscious mind, then you can make suggestions, you can overcome issues, you can deal with fears or phobias you might have, and then you'll see in the waking experience that, oh, now because you've changed your mind, the outer experience in the waking state is different. So you could compare it to deep hypnosis, but obviously it's a little bit different because in a lucid dream, you know it's a dream and you can see by how the dream is responding, how the changes are happening inside your mind. But those are all excellent questions and I want to thank everyone for inviting me here today. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert. And in your honor, we would love for you to sign the back of this and we will give it to a 2-year-old at their well-baby check.
Very nice. Thank you.
Well, compliment check. Thank you. those are great questions too. You know, that's a great program. We have lots of questions, so good job. And we will end with the four-way test. Of the things we say, do, is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?